What would you do if the most powerful man in the world found you? Broken, bruised, and sworn to trust no one? Because when the Alpha King saw her, the pale Omega marked by the moon, he didn't just see a survivor. He saw his fate. But power and love don't mix easily. And when the world hunts what it fears, someone always bleeds. This is The Alpha King Saw the Bruise, a dark fantasy love story where mercy is dead, and only the brave deserve forever.
Pain.
That was the first thing she felt. Not the dull, tired ache she'd grown used to, but the sharp, new kind, clean and deep, like fire under skin. Cold stone pressed against her cheek when she opened her eyes. The world above her blurred, chandeliers of crystal, silken banners embroidered with a crest she didn't recognize. Everything shimmered gold. The scent of cedar and something older filled the air. Her hands were pale, almost translucent, trembling against the polished floor. For a moment, she thought she was dead. Maybe this was the afterlife. Warm light and quiet halls instead of screams and stone corridors. Then her ribs reminded her she was very much alive. She pushed herself up. Her body protested. Each movement sent pain radiating through her side. Her breath hitched. Her fingers touched bandages, clean and tight. Not the filthy scraps from the den. Someone had tended to her. Someone who had the luxury of clean linen. Her name was Lyra, though she'd learned not to say it often. Names had a way of being used against you. She blinked, trying to remember. The Denver. The fight. Running barefoot through the rain. The snap of teeth. The blur of claws. And then nothing. A voice interrupted the silence. Miss Lyra? She turned sharply, too fast, and winced as her ribs screamed. A woman stood in the doorway, middle-aged, dressed in violet silk trimmed with silver. She looked like she belonged in this place. Her expression softened when she saw Lyra struggling. "You're safe now," the woman said gently. "You're in the royal palace of Aerith." Palace. Lyra rasped. Her voice came out dry, like sandpaper. "That doesn't make sense. You were found 3 nights ago, unconscious. His Majesty brought you here himself." "His who?" The woman hesitated. "King Kael'Varen, the Alpha King." The words made her chest tighten. Legends whispered of him. The immortal Alpha who'd united the Northern Pax centuries ago, who ruled with both steel and mercy. But legends didn't save girls like her. Lyra tried to stand. The floor tilted. The woman rushed forward, catching her by the arm. "Please, don't push yourself. The physicians said your ribs." "I need to leave," Lyra said, though the effort made her dizzy. "You can't," the woman insisted softly. "His Majesty." The doors opened before she finished. The air changed, thickened. Lyra didn't need to look to know what entered. Her instincts recognized it first, the heavy weight of dominance, the quiet command that made the air itself hum. She turned anyway. He stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair catching the light. His clothes were simple but finely cut, a white shirt, dark trousers, and no crown. His presence didn't need one. His eyes, cold silver-rimmed with shadow, locked on her like he was seeing through every layer she tried to hide behind. "You're awake," he said, his voice low and measured. Lyra's heart skipped. Something in that tone pulled at something deep inside her, something she didn't want touched. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Kael'Varen," he said. "Alpha King of Aerith." She flinched. He noticed. "I found you near the river," Kael continued, stepping closer. "You were half dead. Broken ribs. Infections setting in. I brought you here."
Why?
He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could feel his heat, but not close enough to touch. His gaze swept over her face, the white hair tangled around her shoulders, the pale lashes, the eyes so red they almost glowed. Albino. The word everyone spat like a curse. His expression changed. The quiet intensity sharpened. "Who hurt you?" he asked. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "You don't know me," Lyra said, her voice cracking. Kael's eyes darkened. "I know what I saw." Someone beat you until you couldn't stand. Lyra tried to look away, but he stepped forward, not threatening, not kind, just inevitable. His hand didn't reach for her. It stayed at his side, but the question in his gaze burned hotter than fire. "The den?" he asked softly. Her silence was answer enough. Something cold settled over his features, not anger, but the kind of fury that belonged to kings and predators. "I'll find out who did this," Kale said. "And when I do, they'll wish they'd never touched you." Lyra wanted to laugh, wanted to scream. She'd heard promises before, from people who swore they'd help and vanished when things got ugly. But there was something in his voice, steady, ancient, terrifyingly sure. He wasn't promising out of pity. He was promising because someone had crossed his line. And for the first time in her life, Lyra wasn't sure whether that made her safer, or in more danger than ever. Lyra didn't remember falling asleep, but when she woke again, sunlight spilled through tall windows. It was the kind of morning light that made everything look like it belonged to someone else's life. The walls gleamed ivory, and the linens smelled faintly of lavender. Her ribs ached less, wrapped tightly in neat white cloth. For a moment, she thought maybe it was all a dream. Then the door opened, and a different woman entered, younger, quiet, with dark braids pinned neatly under a silver clasp. She carried a tray. The scent of real food filled the room. Warm bread, roasted herbs, and something sweet. Lyra's stomach twisted painfully. It had been days since she'd eaten. "Good morning, my lady," the woman said. "His Majesty asked that you eat as soon as you woke." Lyra blinked at her. "My lady?" No one had ever called her that before. "I don't want his food." The servant hesitated, but placed the tray down. "His Majesty also said you'd say that." Lyra frowned. "And what did he tell you to do when I did?" "Remind you that starving won't change anything." Lyra almost laughed. It wasn't a cruel voice, just honest. She sighed and sat up slowly, reaching for the bread. It was warm, soft, fresh. It made her throat tighten. She tore off a small piece and ate. The woman smiled.
I'm Selene.
"I'll be attending you while you're here." "I won't be here long," Lyra muttered. Selene tilted her head. "That depends on His Majesty." "Then I am a prisoner." "No, my lady. You're under protection." Protection feels a lot like captivity. Selene's eyes softened, but she didn't argue. "He asked to see you when you were able." Lyra looked away, chewing slowly. "I don't want to see him." "I'll tell him that," Selene said. "Though I don't imagine he'll listen." Lyra was about to retort when the temperature in the room changed again, subtle but unmistakable. The air thickened, charged. She didn't have to turn to know he was there. Kale stood in the doorway, his presence filling the space like thunderclouds. Selene bowed quickly and left, closing the door behind her. Lyra forced herself not to shrink back. "You could knock." "I did," Kale said. "You didn't answer." Maybe that meant go away. Maybe it meant I should check if you were breathing. She glared at him.
"I fine."
He crossed the room. "You weren't fine 3 nights ago." 3 nights, she repeated quietly. "How long was I unconscious?" "Nearly 3 days," Kale said. "You lost too much blood. The healers did what they could." Her fingers brushed the bandages on her ribs. "Why bother?"
"You don't even know me."
His expression didn't change. "You were dying in my territory. That makes you my responsibility." "That's a strange way to say you should have left me there." "I don't leave people to die," he said simply. Lyra looked away. She'd heard the rumors that the Alpha King was ruthless, but fair. That he executed his own soldiers if they broke the old laws. That his word carried the weight of an oath. But standing here, it was the silence in his tone that unsettled her most. "You said you found me near the river." "Yes." "What happened to the den?" He hesitated, just long enough for her stomach to drop. "What happened to it?" she repeated. "It burned." Her breath caught. "What?" 3 nights ago. The same night I found you. The fire started in the kitchen. The building collapsed before anyone escaped." She stared at him, waiting for the world to start making sense again. "No," she whispered. "That's not, you're lying." Kale's silver eyes didn't flinch. I don't lie. Especially not about death. The words hit harder than any blow she'd ever taken. Everyone.
Gone.
The children. The other Omegas. Even the ones who'd hurt her. The den might have been hell, but it had been hers. Her knees buckled. Kale moved instantly, catching her before she hit the floor. Let go, she hissed. He didn't. Let me go. Not when you can barely stand. I don't need. Her voice broke. I don't need your help. His grip loosened but didn't fall away. Then tell me what you need. Lyra shook her head. Her hair fell forward, pale as frost. I need the truth. You have it. She pressed her trembling hands to her face. So that's it. Everything gone. You're alive, he said quietly. That's not nothing. She laughed, bitter and small. You think survival is the same as living? No, Kale said. I think it's the first step toward it. Silence stretched between them, the kind that hummed with things unsaid. Finally, he straightened. You'll stay here until you've healed. I told you I'm leaving. There's nowhere to go. I'll find somewhere. His gaze hardened. Outside these walls, people are already whispering about the pale Omega the king carried into the palace. If you walk out now, they'll hunt you before nightfall. Then you should have left me in that alley, she said. Kale's voice dropped lower. You were bleeding out. I wasn't going to let you die.
Why?
Out of pity. Out of instinct. Lyra's pulse quickened. What kind of instinct? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes met hers. Ancient, steady, impossible to read. You'll understand soon. I don't want to understand. I want my life back. His expression softened, just a fraction. Sometimes the old life has to burn before a new one can start. Her hands clenched. Don't say that like it's a blessing. It isn't, Kale said, but it's the truth. She turned her face away, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. When she finally looked back, he was still watching her. There was no pity in his gaze. No hunger either. Just something fierce and unyielding. Like he'd already decided her survival meant something more than accident. And in that moment, Lyra realized something terrifying. Whatever bond had begun that night by the river, she wasn't the only one who'd felt it. That night, Lyra dreamed of fire. The walls of the den burned red, the air thick with smoke and the sound of screaming children. She reached for them, but her hands passed through their faces like mist. When she looked down, her skin was burning. White turned to flame. She woke with a cry, drenched in sweat. Her chest rose and fell fast, her bandages sticking to her skin. The moonlight spilling through the window seemed too bright, too alive. Her breath hitched when she saw it, something faint glowing through the linen wrapped around her ribs. A soft light pulsed beneath the cloth, steady as a heartbeat. What the? She fumbled, tearing away the top layer of bandage. The glow came from a mark etched into her skin just under the ribs. A shape, curved like a crescent, silver white, faint but undeniably there. It hadn't been there before. Lyra's stomach twisted. She rubbed at it hard, but it didn't fade. It was part of her. The door opened. She jumped, clutching the blanket to her chest. Kale stood in the doorway, still dressed from court, the silver clasp on his shoulder glinting. I heard you cry out, he said, scanning her face. Nightmare? Lyra didn't answer. His eyes fell to her side, to the faint glow beneath the open bandage. He froze. So, it's begun, he murmured. What is that? She demanded. Did you do this to me? No. He stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. The mark appears on its own. It's called the crescent bond. She shook her head.
No.
No, I don't believe in your ancient superstitions. You don't have to believe for it to be real. Lyra pressed her hand to the mark, trembling. Take it off. Whatever it is, remove it. He met her gaze, silver to crimson. I can't. No one can. It appears when the goddess chooses to tie two souls together. Her stomach dropped. You mean? Yes, he said quietly. It ties you to me. Lyra laughed, sharp and hysterical. You're insane. Maybe, Kale said softly. But I've seen it before. The mark glows on the one bound to their fated pair. When I found you, the moment I touched your skin, I felt it, something ancient waking in me. I didn't expect it to be real again. Lyra backed away until her legs hit the bed. You think I'm your mate? I don't think. I know. Well, I don't accept it, she snapped. I reject it. Whatever this is, make it stop. His jaw tightened. You can deny the bond, but it will still exist. It weakens if one refuses it, but it doesn't vanish. So I'm trapped. Again. No, Kale said. Not trapped. Chosen. By who? A goddess who's never done a damn thing for me. He didn't argue. He only looked at her, really looked at her, with something that made her chest tighten in ways she didn't want to name. Lyra, he said after a moment, voice low. You survived the den for 23 years. You think that's coincidence? You think you lived because of luck? You're stronger than most I've met in 2 centuries. The bond didn't make you. It just recognized what you already were. She glared at him. Don't dress it up like fate. I'm not your salvation story. I didn't say you were. Then what am I? His eyes softened. Proof. Of what? That there's still something worth protecting in this world. Her throat tightened. You talk like someone who's already lost too much. I have. He stepped back, giving her space. And I won't lose you too. Lyra looked down at the faint light still pulsing against her ribs. It flickered once and dimmed, fading into the pale of her skin. For a long moment neither spoke. The night air between them seemed alive with something fragile and dangerous. Finally, she whispered, What happens now? You rest, he said. You heal. And when you're strong enough, I'll tell you the rest. The rest? Why the den burned, he said quietly. And who lit the match? The next morning, Lyra found herself standing by the window, staring out over the city of Aerith. From here, the capital looked peaceful. White rooftops glittering in sunlight, the river curling through the streets like a silver vein. She could almost pretend none of it was real. Celine entered carrying folded garments. His Majesty requests your presence for lunch. Lyra sighed. He doesn't take no for an answer, does he? Celine smiled faintly. Not when it comes to things that matter. What makes you think I matter? Celine hesitated. Because since the day he found you, he's changed. He used to spend most days in the War Council or alone in the archives. Now the staff whispers. He walks the halls at night. They say he's waiting for something. Lyra bit the inside of her cheek. Or someone. The servant didn't confirm it. She only handed Lyra the clothes. He wanted you to have these. Lyra unfolded them. A simple gray dress, soft but practical.
No la sé, no jewels.
Exactly her style. He chose this himself, she asked. Yes, my lady. That made her chest ache in a way she didn't understand. When she finally entered the dining hall, Kale was already waiting. The room wasn't as grand as she'd expected. Just a small table, sunlight streaming through stained glass. He rose when she entered. You're stronger. I can walk without falling. That's an improvement. Good, he said, motioning for her to sit.
Eat.
She stared at him. You always give orders like that? I'm not ordering. I'm offering. Feels the same. Then I'll work on my tone. That earned him a reluctant smirk. They ate in near silence. Lyra's mind wouldn't stop circling back to the mark, to the words he'd said the night before. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. You said you knew who lit the match. Kale set his cup down. Not who.
What?
The den wasn't destroyed by accident. It was silenced. Her blood went cold. Silence. There are those who profit from keeping unregistered Omegas hidden, he said. You were one of many. When word reached the wrong ears that I'd found you, someone panicked. They erased the evidence. Lyra's hand tightened around her spoon. The fire was meant to cover their tracks. Yes. So everyone died because of me. Kale's eyes hardened.
No.
Because of them. You survived because you were meant to expose them. She swallowed the lump in her throat. And you're going to make them pay? Yes, Kale said. Every last one. Lyra met his gaze. Steady now. Then I'll help you. His brow furrowed. That's not your burden. It's my life, she said. They took everything from me. Don't tell me to sit here and heal while you fight my war. Kale exhaled slowly. You remind me of someone.
Who?
My mother, he said, the faintest smile ghosting across his lips. She never took orders either. Lyra blinked at that. Then, for the first time since waking in this palace, she felt something new. Not fear. Not anger. A flicker of belonging. The next morning, the palace guards almost tripped over themselves when they saw Lyra crossing the training yard. She wore plain trousers, a linen shirt rolled at the sleeves, and a look that dared anyone to question her right to be there. Kale waited at the far end of the courtyard, dressed in black training leathers, sunlight glinting off the metal clasps at his wrists. The rest of the field was empty. He'd cleared it for them. Lyra stopped a few paces away. You said I should rest. I did, Kale replied, tossing her a wooden practice blade. She caught it awkwardly.
This isn't rest.
This is preparation. For what? For whoever comes next. She stared at the blade in her hands. I've never used one of these. Good, he said. Bad habits take longer to unlearn. She frowned. You think this is a good idea? Teaching the fragile little Omega to fight. His lips curved faintly. I've seen you stand against worse than me with no weapon at all. Survival isn't fighting. Then let's start teaching you the difference. He circled her, slow and deliberate, like a wolf assessing a challenge. First rule, never apologize for defending yourself. Second, your size isn't a weakness. It's misdirection. Small means fast. Fast means unpredictable. Lyra gripped the sword tighter. You think a few lessons will make me dangerous? No, Kale said, stepping close enough that his breath brushed her ear. I think you already are. Her heart thudded.
She swung.
It was clumsy. Too wide, too obvious. Kale blocked easily, the wooden blades cracking together. Better than I expected, he murmured. Don't patronize me. Then make me shut up. She swung again, faster this time. He deflected, stepped sideways, and tapped the back of her knee with his own blade. She stumbled, caught herself, glared. Again, he said. They repeated the pattern until sweat slicked her skin and her ribs burned. The pain was duller now, manageable. Every strike, every breath made her body feel more her own. When she finally dropped her sword, gasping, Kale didn't smirk or gloat. He just handed her a flask of water. You learn fast. Because I have to. That's what strength really is, he said quietly. Not being unbreakable, just refusing to stay broken. Lyra took the flask. Their fingers brushed. A faint spark leapt between them, quick and bright. The mark under her ribs warmed. Kale noticed. His eyes flicked to her side, then back to her face. He said nothing, but she could feel the pull between them like invisible thread tightening. She turned away. Enough training for today. As you wish, he said, voice unreadable. But the next morning, she returned on her own. The lessons continued for weeks. Kale taught her how to twist out of a grip, how to use momentum instead of strength, how to turn a fall into a strike. Sometimes he pushed her too hard. Sometimes she pushed back harder. The guards learned to clear the yard when they saw them together. It wasn't just about combat. Kale made her read maps, identify weak points in armor, even recite old laws about Omega rights. He said a warrior wasn't just muscle, it was mind and will. Lyra hated how much she liked it. At night, she would collapse into her bed aching, bruised, and alive. The nightmares came less often. When they did, they no longer ended in fire but in a pair of silver eyes, steady and unflinching, pulling her out of the smoke. One morning, during a sparring session, she finally disarmed him. Kale's sword clattered to the ground. He looked up at her from where he'd fallen to one knee. Lyra stood above him, panting, her hair sticking to her forehead. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he smiled, slow, proud, dangerous. You learn fast, he said again. She lifted her chin. Told you not to underestimate me. Never did. The silence that followed wasn't the sharp kind. It hummed, alive, charged. Lyra was suddenly aware of how close they were. His hand still rested on her boot. Her breath hitched. Kale's smile faded, replaced by something softer. Lyra. Don't. Her voice came out hoarse. Don't what? Whatever you're about to do. He stood, the air between them crackling. You think I'm going to hurt you? No, she said. That's what scares me. For once, he didn't have an answer. They ended the session there. That night, Lyra wandered the palace gardens alone. Moonlight shimmered across the fountains. She traced the marble rim with her fingers, thinking about the way Kale's eyes had changed when she'd beaten him. Like he'd seen something he hadn't dared hope for. Miss Lyra? Celine's voice startled her. The servant stood nearby, holding a lantern. Forgive me, but His Majesty asked me to bring this. She handed Lyra a folded note, sealed with wax bearing the royal crest. Lyra hesitated before breaking it open. If you can't sleep, meet me by the training hall terrace. No armor tonight, just honesty.
Cajo.
Her pulse jumped. Tell him she started, but Celine was already gone, lanterns swinging gently in the dark. Lyra looked up at the palace, the distant torchlight flickering in the upper windows. She could say no. She should say no. Instead, she found herself walking toward the terrace. Kale was waiting by the balustrade, leaning on the stone edge, moonlight silvering his hair. He looked up when she approached. I thought you might come, he said softly. I almost didn't. I would have understood. They stood side by side in silence. The night air was cool, scented with jasmine. Finally, Kale spoke. When I found you, I thought the bond was a curse. I didn't want it. I've lost too much already, family, allies, lovers who grew old while I didn't. I told myself I wouldn't bind again. Then why keep me here? Because the moment I touched you, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 centuries. He looked at her.
Peace.
Lyra's throat tightened. You talk like I'm a miracle.
No, he said.
You're a mirror. You make me see who I've become, and who I want to be again. She turned toward him, red eyes catching the moonlight. And what if I can't give you what you want? Then I'll still protect you, he said simply. Not because of the bond. Because you deserve to live without fear. Lyra stared at him, searching for the lie. There wasn't one. For the first time, she believed him. By the time the frost began to thin across the palace courtyards, Lyra could almost forget she had once been a shadow among broken things. Almost. She trained every morning until sweat soaked through her shirt and her arms trembled from the weight of the wooden sword. Kale never praised too easily, but his quiet nods and brief, almost hidden smiles became their own currency. One afternoon, as she caught her breath, he tossed her a small knife. The hilt fit perfectly in her palm. What's this for? She asked. For when your enemy thinks you've already surrendered, he said. You hide it here. He tapped her boot. Surprise is half of survival. Lyra smirked. Is that your royal philosophy? He shrugged. It works in politics too. She laughed despite herself. Politics. That sounds worse than fighting. It is, Kale said, rubbing the scar that cut across his left knuckle. At least in a fight, your enemy shows his teeth. In the council chamber, they smile while they plan your death. Sounds like my den, she murmured. His expression softened. I know. That's why I'm teaching you this. Not just to fight, to see the traps before they close. She didn't answer, but she sheathed the knife exactly where he told her. Later that day, while Kale met with his advisors, Lyra wandered into the library. It was vast, 3 stories of stone and gold, full of dust and stories too old to believe. She ran her fingers across the spines of books written in languages she couldn't read. A low voice interrupted her thoughts. The last albino Omega recorded in the chronicles was 300 years ago. Lyra turned. A man stood at the end of the aisle, tall, blonde, draped in deep green robes that marked him as a member of the royal council. His expression was polite, but his eyes gleamed sharp.
I'm sorry.
He stepped closer, bowing slightly. Forgive me. I'm Lord Varen, His Majesty's advisor on pack affairs. You must be the Omega everyone's talking about. Lyra stiffened. I'm no one important. But that's the interesting part, isn't it? You were no one. And then suddenly the Alpha King brings you into his palace and clears the court for your privacy. The other kingdoms are curious. Curious about what? About what makes you worth all this. His gaze flicked briefly to her ribs, as if he somehow sensed the hidden mark beneath her clothes. Lyra took a step back. If you're asking whether I asked for any of this, the answer's no. He smiled, thin and fox-like. Of course not. But sometimes fate doesn't ask permission. The way he said it made her skin crawl. She turned toward the door. I should go. He inclined his head. Give His Majesty my regards. And be careful who you trust. When she left, she swore she could still feel his eyes on her back. That night, Cale found her sitting on the balcony outside her chambers. She hadn't touched the food on her tray. Celine said you skipped dinner again, he said quietly. Wasn't hungry. He leaned against the stone railing beside her. What did Varen say to you? Lyra glanced at him sharply. How did you? I could smell his scent on your sleeve. He was close. She looked away. He just asked questions. About why you keep me here. And, what did you tell him? The truth. That I don't know. Cale's jaw tightened. Stay away from him.
Why?
He's your advisor. He was my advisor, Cale corrected. Now he's a problem I haven't decided how to handle. Lyra frowned. You think he'd hurt me? I think he'd use you. There's a difference. A silence fell. The city lights shimmered below, the river cutting through Aerith like a ribbon of silver flame. Finally, Lyra asked, Cale, why me? There are thousands of Omegas. Why risk everything for one? He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet but certain. Because you're the only one whose pain made the air itself change. She turned to him. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have, he said. Something in his tone made her heartbeat stutter. The next morning, she woke to shouting in the courtyard below. She threw on a cloak and ran to the balcony. A group of guards surrounded a bloodied courier, his clothes torn, his hands bound. One of Cale's generals held a parchment in his fist. Cale strode into view, cloak sweeping behind him. The moment the guards saw him, they dropped to one knee. Speak, Cale ordered. The courier's voice trembled. Your Majesty, the border outpost was attacked. The caravan gone. The prisoners taken. What prisoners? Cale demanded. The man swallowed. Omegas, sire. 24. Smugglers ambushed the transport heading to the southern refuge. Lyra's stomach turned. Cale's eyes flashed silver. By who? The courier hesitated. The mark they left, it was the same crest burned into the den's gate before it fell. A wolf's head crowned with chains. Cale went still. Lyra gripped the railing until her knuckles went white. You know that symbol. He looked up at her on the balcony, his gaze like a blade.
Ido.
It belongs to the Syndicate. The Syndicate? He nodded grimly. A network of traffickers. Rich alphas who sell Omegas across kingdoms. The den was one of theirs. Lyra's breath hitched. Then the fire. Was their way of burying the evidence. She stared down at him, fury sparking behind her ribs. We have to stop them. You will do nothing of the sort, Cale said sharply. They'd kill you on sight. Then teach me how not to die, she snapped. His expression shifted, from anger to something like fear, quickly buried. Lyra, this isn't a training yard. This is war. Then make me a soldier, she said. The courtyard fell silent. Cale studied her for a long time, the wind tugging at his cloak. Then he said quietly, You're asking for a life you can't unchoose. I already had one I didn't choose, she replied. At least this time, I'll be fighting back. Something fierce flickered behind his eyes. He turned to his general. Prepare the war council. We leave at dawn. Then he looked back up at Lyra, silver gaze locked on hers. If you truly want to fight, Then you'll stand beside me. She didn't look away. Then I'll stand. That night, as the moon rose over Aerith, Kale stood alone in the war chamber staring at maps spread across the table. Lines of ink marked battlefronts, trade routes, shadows of enemies that had no faces. Behind him, the door creaked open softly. Lyra's voice drifted through the dim. You really plan to take me with you? He didn't turn. If I don't, you'll follow anyway. Probably, she admitted. He smiled faintly. Then yes. But under my protection. Always. She stepped closer until they were shoulder to shoulder, both looking down at the map. What if we fail? She asked. Then we try again, he said. And again. Until every den burns for the right reason. Lyra touched the map, tracing the marked route with her fingertip. Then let's begin. And though the night outside the palace whispered of danger, for the first time, Lyra felt something fierce and unbreakable stirring in her chest, something dangerously close to hope. Dawn and Aerith carried the smell of frost and iron. Lyra stood in the courtyard as soldiers moved around her, preparing horses, checking weapons, fastening armor. She still wasn't used to the sound of clanking metal echoing through marble halls. It felt like thunder in a place built for peace. Kale emerged from the stables, already armored. His chestplate gleamed black and silver, etched with the sigil of the Northern Wolf. He looked every bit the legend whispered about in border taverns. Lyra swallowed hard. You look terrifying. He adjusted the strap across his shoulder. Good. Terrifying keeps enemies cautious. And allies nervous. He smirked at that. You're not nervous. Who says I'm not? I can hear your heartbeat, he said, steady as a war drum. She looked away, cheeks flushing. Don't listen to it then. I can't help it. The teasing vanished as General Kor approached. The scouts confirmed syndicate movement near the old mines, Your Majesty. They're using the tunnels to hide transports. Kale nodded. We move in 2 groups. I'll lead the first. Varen leads the second. Varen, Lyra cut in. You're still trusting him after everything? Kale's jaw tightened. Until I have proof of betrayal, yes. He knows the southern routes better than anyone. Lyra frowned but said nothing. She was still learning that kings didn't have the luxury of gut instincts alone. Kale turned back to her. You stay near me. If anything feels wrong, you say so. Lyra tilted her chin up. What if you feel wrong? He smiled faintly. Then you have permission to drag me out by the collar. I'll remember that. They mounted their horses and rode out through the gates as the sun rose, painting the world in cold gold. The road to the mines wound through forests so dense the light barely touched the ground. Lyra rode in silence, cloak snapping behind her. The mark under her ribs throbbed faintly with every heartbeat. Kale, she said after a while. What if they know we're coming? They will, he said. The syndicate always knows. Then we're walking into a trap. He glanced at her. Yes. She blinked. That's the plan? Sometimes the only way to kill a wolf is to make it think you're the prey. Her stomach twisted. You're really bad at comforting people. I'm not trying to comfort you, he said. I'm preparing you. When they finally reached the ridge overlooking the mine, smoke curled from below. Dozens of wagons waited in the valley, guarded by heavily armed alphas wearing the chained wolf crest. Lyra's breath caught. How many? Kale's eyes narrowed. Too many for one ambush. We wait for nightfall. They camped among the rocks, hidden by trees. Lyra watched Kale as he studied the valley through a spyglass. The light caught in his hair, and for a moment, he didn't look like a king, just a man carrying the weight of too many ghosts. Do you ever get tired of being the one everyone looks to? She asked quietly. Yes, he said. But leadership isn't about wanting it. It's about refusing to abandon it. She considered that. Then, who leads you? He looked at her. No one. Not until now. Her throat went dry. That sounds dangerous. It is, he said softly. For both of us. Night came fast. Clouds rolled in thick and low. Kale's forces split silently into 2 flanks. Torches were forbidden. They moved by moonlight and instinct. Lyra crouched beside Kale on the ridge. Stay behind me, he whispered. She nodded, gripping her knife. The same knife he'd taught her to hide. The signal came, a hawk's cry echoing through the canyon. The first group charged down the slope. Chaos erupted below. Shouts, the clash of steel, the smell of smoke and blood. Kale leapt into the fray like a storm given flesh. Lyra followed close, every lesson he'd drilled into her flashing through her mind. She ducked under a swinging blade, slashed at an attacker's knee, twisted away before he could grab her. Her heart pounded, her breath sharp. The noise was deafening, metal on metal, screams, the thud of hooves. Across the chaos, she saw Kale take down 3 syndicate guards in quick, brutal motions. He fought like he was born to it. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Then a flash of green cloak caught her eye. Varen. He was supposed to be leading the second flank, but he was standing near a wagon, speaking to a syndicate soldier. And then she saw it. He handed the man a sealed scroll. Kale, she shouted. But the warning came too late. The ground exploded beneath them. A roar tore through the valley as fire burst from the mine entrance, swallowing wagons and men alike. The force threw Lyra backward. She hit the ground hard, the world spinning, ears ringing. Through the smoke, she saw Kale struggling to stand, blood running down his temple. Lyra, he shouted, stumbling toward her. A figure stepped between them. Varen, his green cloak torn, but his eyes cold. You should have stayed in the palace, girl. Lyra's hand went to her boot, fingers closing around the knife. You betrayed him, she said. Varen smiled thinly. The syndicate pays better than loyalty. He lunged. She barely dodged the blade, slashing upward.
Steel met flesh.
Varen hissed, clutching his arm. Kale roared, charging through the smoke. Varen turned and fled toward the burning wagons. Kale caught his cloak, yanking him back, but the traitor drove his own knife into the king's side before twisting free and disappearing into the flames. Kale. Lyra dropped to her knees beside him. He grimaced, blood seeping through his armor. It's nothing. It's not nothing. She pressed her hands to the wound. The mark under her ribs blazed white-hot, responding to his pain. Lyra. Shut up, she snapped. You're not dying out here. The mark pulsed harder, light spilling between her fingers. Kale's body arched, his breath caught. The wound closed slowly beneath her hands, flesh knitting with the glow. When the light faded, he stared at her in stunned silence. You healed me. I didn't mean to, she panted. It just happened. His eyes darkened, not with fear but awe. The bond. Lyra shivered. What does that mean? It means, he said softly, we're connected more than I thought. Around them, the valley burned. The syndicate's camp was destroyed, but Varen had escaped. Lyra stood, staring into the smoke. This isn't over. Kale rose beside her, wiping the blood from his face. No, he said. It's just begun. They rode back to Aerith beneath a bruised dawn. The fires behind them stained the sky red. The smell of smoke followed like a ghost. Lyra didn't speak for hours. Her mind replayed the blast, the look on Kale's face when the mine went up, the way Varen's knife had vanished into his ribs. She kept seeing it over and over. Kale rode beside her, pale but steady. His wound had closed, yet she could feel it still throbbing faintly under her own skin, as if some echo of it lived in her body too. When the palace gates finally came into view, the sentries dropped to one knee. Kale dismounted without a word and motioned for Lyra to follow him straight to the council chamber. Inside, the air stank of incense and tension. The generals were waiting. Maps, scrolls, and blood-spattered armor littered the long table. Kale slammed his gauntlet down hard enough to make the candles jump. Varen is a traitor, he said, voice low but deadly. He's with the syndicate. Spread the word through every outpost. I want him found. General Kor bowed his head. Your Majesty, shall we send assassins? No, Kale's eyes glittered like ice. I'll face him myself. Lyra stepped forward. You can't go after him alone. The generals glanced at her, startled. Few Omegas had ever spoken in this room, much less interrupted a king. Kale didn't rebuke her. "And what would you have me do, Lyra?" "Use me," she said. "He wants me dead as much as he wants you. I can draw him out." The room erupted in protest, but Kale raised a hand. Silence fell. His gaze fixed on her, sharp, searching. "You'd make yourself bait?" "If it ends this," she said. "Yes." He looked ready to argue, then stopped himself. "We'll discuss it later." Turning to the generals, he added, "Leave us." When they were gone, the anger that had been simmering under his skin broke loose. He paced the chamber, hands clenched. "You could have been killed, Lyra." "I could have," she admitted. "So could you. But we're both still here." "That isn't good enough." She stepped closer. "Then make it good enough. Teach me what comes next."
He stopped pacing.
The fury in his eyes dimmed into something heavier. "Do you even understand what you did back there? The healing? That bond isn't just a mark, it's a link. When one of us bleeds, the other feels it." Her stomach nodded. "So, when you were stabbed, your ribs burned, didn't they?" She nodded. He ran a hand through his hair. "If I fall in battle, it could kill you. Then don't fall." That earned the ghost of a smile. "You make impossible things sound easy." "Maybe they are if you stop being dramatic." He laughed, a short, surprised sound that broke the tension for a heartbeat. Then his expression hardened again. "I can't let Varen use that bond against us. If he discovers it, he'll find a way to turn it into a weapon." Lyra folded her arms. "Then we get to him first." Kale studied her a long moment, then crossed the room and drew a dagger from the table, a small blade engraved with runes. He pressed it into her palm. "What's this?" "A vow knife. It seals blood oaths." Lyra's pulse jumped. "You're serious?" "Completely." He unsheathed his own and sliced a thin line across his thumb, the blood welling crimson dark. "Repeat after me." She swallowed hard but mimicked the gesture, the sting sharp and clean. Kale's voice dropped to a growl that reverberated through the chamber. "By blood and breath, by moon and earth, we hunt together." Lyra's voice trembled. "We hunt together. In life or death, no shadow will divide us." She met his eyes. "No shadow will divide us." He reached out, pressed his bleeding thumb to hers. The blood mingled, hissed, and the mark under her ribs flared white-hot. A shockwave rippled through her chest. Heat, light, something older than language. She gasped as images flickered behind her eyes. A snowy forest, a full moon, two wolves circling each other, one dark, one pale. When the light faded, she realized Kale was breathing hard too. "What was that?" she whispered. "The oath," he said hoarsely. "It's done." Lyra stared at their joined hands. "So we're bound now?" He nodded. "Completely." She withdrew her hand, staring at the faint silver glow on her thumb. "Sounds like madness." "It is," he said softly. "And now it's ours." For the next few days, the palace thrummed with restless energy. Scouts came and went. Spies brought scraps of information from the border towns. Every rumor pointed to the same truth. Varen hadn't vanished. He was building something bigger. Lyra trained harder than ever, her body healing faster each day as if the bond itself was pushing her to grow stronger. Kale watched her silently, pride warring with worry. One evening, after a long session in the yard, he caught her wrist before she could leave. "Tomorrow, you'll ride with me," he said. "Where?" "To the southern frontier. Varen's gathering his allies there. I want you to see the faces of the enemy before you face him." "Is that another lesson?"
"Yes."
"The hardest one." She tilted her head. "And what's that?" "That mercy is the first thing war tries to kill." That night, she couldn't sleep. The mark on her ribs pulsed faintly, in rhythm with the heartbeat she could feel, his heartbeat. She pressed her hand to it, whispering into the dark, "Don't you dare die on me, Kale." Somewhere across the palace, he stirred from his own restless dreams and smiled without knowing why. The wind grew hotter as they rode south. The trees thinned, replaced by cracked earth and stretches of ochre stone. The air tasted like dust and rusted iron. Lyra had never seen land like this, burned by sun instead of fire, yet just as unforgiving. They traveled with a small company. A dozen riders, silent and grim. Each wore no crest, no color, only plain steel. Kale said stealth mattered more than banners. It was strange seeing a king without his sigil. Stripped of ceremony, he looked more dangerous, like a blade drawn from its scabbard. When night fell, they camped near a dried riverbed. The horizon burned orange, a dying sun smothered by smoke from distant fires. Lyra crouched near the embers, rubbing her palms for warmth. Kale sat opposite, sharpening a dagger with slow, steady motions. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked. He looked up, faintly amused. "You sound like Celine." "I'm beginning to understand why she scolds you," Lyra said. "You act like rest is a weakness." He turned the dagger in his hands, studying the reflection of the flames. "Rest gets men killed. And exhaustion doesn't?" "Touché." She smiled despite the heaviness in her chest. It felt strange, smiling in a war camp. Wrong, but also needed. The silence between them deepened, not uncomfortable, just quiet. Crickets hummed somewhere in the distance. The soldiers murmured prayers to the moon goddess before sleep. Lyra didn't know the words, but she found herself whispering anyway, half mocking, half sincere. When she looked up, Kale was watching her. "What?" she asked. "You were praying." "I was pretending to," she said. Maybe she only listens to those who don't beg for anything. Kale's gaze softened. "And what would you ask for if she did listen?" Lyra thought for a moment. "For truth. The kind that doesn't shatter when you touch it." He nodded once. "Then you'll have it soon." They reached the southern frontier at dawn. The land dipped into low hills threaded with blackened ruins. Smoke rose in thin columns from the valley below. Kale dismounted and motioned for her to follow. They crept to the ridge overlooking a sprawling encampment, a fortress built from scavenged stone and rusted steel. Hundreds of wagons stood in neat rows, guarded by alphas, wearing the chained wolf crest. Lyra's breath caught. "There are hundreds of them." "More," Kale murmured. "The syndicate has been busy." He handed her a spyglass. "Look closer. Tell me what you see." She raised it, focusing on the central square. At first, it looked like cages. Then she realized they were cages, iron ones, stacked in tiers. Inside them huddled Omegas, thin and trembling, collars gleaming in the light. Her stomach turned. "Goddess." Kale's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened until the muscle jumped. "Now you know why we fight." "How long have they been doing this?" she whispered.
"Too long," he said.
"And the worst part is half the noble houses profit from it." Lyra lowered the spyglass. "So, we burn it." He looked at her sharply. "No rash decisions." "You gave me a knife, remember?" she said, voice shaking with fury. "You said surprise is half of survival." "This is different." "No, Kale, it's not." Shouts filled the camp. Varen turned sharply, eyes widening as Kale dropped from the shadows and landed in the square below. "Varen!" Kale's voice cracked like thunder. "For treason against the crown and the gods, you face judgment." Varen smirked, drawing his sword. "Still playing king, Kale? You never did learn the difference between power and chains." The two clashed in an explosion of steel and fury. Sparks flew as their blades met, the air alive with the hum of the bond echoing through Lyra's chest. She ran to the cages, slicing through locks, throwing doors open. The captives stumbled out, dazed, whispering thanks. Behind her, the fight raged. Kale drove Varen back with brutal precision, but the traitor fought like a cornered beast. He feinted left, then slashed low, catching Kale's leg. Kale stumbled. Lyra didn't think. She hurled her knife. It cut through the air, striking Varen's shoulder. He shouted, spinning toward her. "You again!" He lunged. Kale intercepted him, their blades locking. Varen snarled, forcing the edge toward Kale's throat. Lyra ran forward, grabbed a fallen sword, and drove it through Varen's back. The sound was sickening. Varen gasped, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at her once, hatred and disbelief mingling in his stare, and then collapsed. For a moment no one moved. Then Kale caught her arm, pulling her against him. "You're bleeding," he said roughly. She looked down. A shallow cut traced across her forearm. "Barely. You could have been killed." "So could you," she said, breathless. "I guess we're even." He laughed once, raw, relieved, and pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Around them, the freed Omegas gathered, staring at their fallen captors, at the king who had come for them. Lyra turned to them. "It's over," she said softly. "You're free." Kale's voice followed, low but commanding. "Not just free. Protected. Aerith will shelter you." The crowd murmured, disbelief giving way to hope. And for the first time in her life, Lyra saw what power could look like when it was used for something other than cruelty. But even as the flames devoured the fortress, Kale whispered in her ear, "This isn't their end. The Syndicate has a leader above, Varen." Lyra stiffened.
Who?
His eyes gleamed silver in the firelight. "The one they call the Collector." They returned to Aerith as heroes, but the air in the palace was wrong. Too quiet. Too heavy. Servants bowed lower than usual and avoided meeting Lyra's eyes. Council members whispered in corners when Kale passed, their expressions tight with fear or jealousy. Varen's body had been burned, his ashes scattered into the northern winds, yet the ripples of his betrayal hadn't faded. He had left letters behind, warnings, threats, promises to powerful allies still in hiding. The Syndicate was wounded, not dead. Lyra sat on the balcony one evening, watching the last of the sunset fade. The city below glittered like a sea of stars, beautiful and fragile. And she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Kale joined her quietly, his presence a storm contained in human form. He set down 2 goblets of wine and handed her one. "You're quiet tonight." "I'm thinking," she said. "About what?" "How easy it is to rebuild cages," she murmured. "Even golden ones." He frowned. "You're not my prisoner, Lyra." "I know," she said, turning toward him. "But look around you. Every smile I get is forced. Every glance is a calculation. They don't see me. They see what I am, a threat they can't touch because you won't let them." Kale's voice softened. "They fear what they don't understand. Then maybe they should start learning." He smiled faintly. "You sound like a queen already." "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't call me that." He studied her. "Because you don't want it, or because you don't think you deserve it?" She didn't answer. He didn't press. That night, a messenger arrived at the palace gates, bleeding, half-conscious, clutching a charred parchment. Kale broke the seal himself. Inside was a single symbol, a silver crown made of linked chains. Beneath it, 3 words written in blood. "I have the children." Lyra's heart stopped. "The Collector." Kale's hand clenched around the parchment. "He's taunting us." "Where?" The messenger coughed, voice ragged. "South, beyond the marshes. Fortress carved into the cliffs." He didn't finish. His eyes rolled back, and he was gone. Kale closed the man's eyes and stood slowly. "Gather the council." "Wait," Lyra said, grabbing his arm. "If you march an army, he'll kill them before you get close. Then what would you suggest?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "We go alone." Kale blinked. "You and me? You said he wants me. He'll expect me to come. Let him." "Lyra."
No, listen.
She stepped closer, fierce. "He wants to prove you can't protect me. So let him believe it. Let him think he's winning. And while he's gloating, we strike." Kale stared at her, torn between fury and pride. "You're asking me to risk everything on a gamble. I'm asking you to trust me." That stopped him cold. He exhaled slowly. "You're going to be the death of me." She smiled faintly. "Only if you're lucky." The next night, they rode out under the cover of a storm. Lightning split the sky as they crossed the marshlands, the horses wading through black water up to their knees. Every flash revealed jagged cliffs ahead, and at their base, torchlight. The Collector's fortress. Lyra's stomach twisted. Even from here, she could feel it. The air hummed with something wrong. Old power soaked in suffering. Kale dismounted first. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." "Not this time," she said. "We do this together." They slipped through the outer walls, silent as ghosts. The corridors inside were lined with cages. Some empty, some not. The smell of rot clung to everything. At the center of it all stood a throne carved from bone. The man who sat upon it looked nothing like she expected. He wasn't monstrous. He wasn't scarred or feral. He was elegant, silver hair, pale eyes, dressed in black silk. "Welcome, Lyra of the Den," the Collector said. His voice was smooth as oil. "And the infamous Alpha King. How poetic." Kale stepped forward. "Release them." The Collector smiled. "You came to my home. You should know the rules here. I don't release property." Lyra's fury burned hot enough to chase away fear. "They're not property." He tilted his head. "You're proof that they are. Your kind was made to be owned. Even your bond proves it, tied to the strongest alpha, helpless without him." Kale's growl filled the hall. "Careful." But it's true," the Collector purred. "She feels your pain, your heartbeat, your rage. You've built a cage of love instead of iron, but it's still a cage." Lyra stepped forward. "You think you understand the bond? I've studied it. I've harvested it. I've watched Omegas die from rejection just to see what happens when the connection snaps." "Then you miss something," she said, voice trembling but strong. "Oh." Lyra's mark burned through her shirt, glowing faintly white. "You forgot that the bond goes both ways." Before the Collector could react, she grabbed Kale's wrist and let the power surge. Light exploded from her chest, racing through the bond, into him. Kale gasped, his eyes flaring silver white. The mark on his neck ignited in response. Together, they unleashed it. Every pulse of fury, every wound, every shred of pain they'd both endured. The air shattered like glass. The Collector screamed as the light hit him, ripping through his magic. The throne cracked down the middle, cages bursting open one by one. The storm outside howled in answer. When it was over, the hall was silent. The Collector lay crumpled on the floor, unmoving. Lyra swayed, barely able to stand. Kale caught her before she fell. "You reckless, impossible woman," he murmured. "You told me to take up space," she whispered weakly. "I took your advice." He laughed softly, brushing her hair from her face. "You terrify me." "Good," she said. "Then we're even." They freed the children, half-starved, terrified, but alive. The Syndicate's fortress burned behind them, flames licking the cliffs like a final curse undone. But as they rode back through the storm, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that the Collector's last words still echoed somewhere deep inside her. A cage of love is still a cage. She didn't yet know if she believed him, but the thought lingered like a bruise under the skin. The fires from the Collector's fortress had burned for 3 days, staining the horizon black even from Eretha's distant towers. When Kale and Lyra finally crossed the northern gates, the city erupted in cheers that rolled like thunder through the streets. To the people, the war was over. To Kale and Lyra, it had merely changed shape. Inside the palace, the council gathered. Scrolls, reports, and praise piled high, yet behind every congratulation was unease. Everyone knew the Syndicate's shadow had stretched far beyond a single fortress. And everyone could see how the king and his strange pale Omega had begun to move together, as if one heartbeat powered them both. Kale stood before the council table, cloak discarded, eyes dark with exhaustion. "The Syndicate is broken, but their gold still moves through noble hands. I want every transaction, every hidden account exposed. Confiscate their estates. Free every Omega under their control." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some agreed, others hesitated. One older noble, Duke Renard, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, with respect, Not all Omegas wish to be free. Their handlers maintain order. Removing that balance could destabilize. The dagger left Kale's hand before the Duke finished. It landed in the table an inch from the man's wrist, quivering. Order built on chains isn't order, Kale said quietly. It's rot. And I've had enough rot. Silence fell. No one argued again. Lyra stood near the doorway, silent but watching. When Kale left the chamber hours later, she followed him to the balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. The night was cold, the air sharp with pine and rain. You almost killed a duke, she said. Almost, he replied. You'll make enemies faster than allies like that. I can live with enemies. He leaned on the railing, gaze distant. What I can't live with is this kingdom pretending to be righteous while it feeds on suffering. She studied him in the moonlight, the weight in his shoulders, the weariness in his voice. He looked like a man who had won everything and lost pieces of himself doing it. Kale, she said softly, you can't save the whole world. He turned to her. Then tell me what's left worth saving. Her heart twisted.
Me. Us.
The ones who survived. He reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined, the bond thrumming between them like a quiet pulse. Days passed. The rescued Omegas were given shelter in the city's outer districts. Lyra spent every morning among them, teaching, listening, building something new from ashes. For the first time, she felt useful. Not a symbol, not a prisoner, a leader. When she returned to the palace each night, Kale was usually waiting, sleeves rolled up, arguing with ministers or drafting reforms. Once, she found him asleep at the table, quill still in hand. She covered him with his cloak and whispered, "Rest, stubborn wolf," before slipping away. But beneath the fragile calm, a question gnawed at her. The next night, they rode to the high cliffs above Aerith where the ruins of the first temple stood. The moon hung enormous, bathing everything in white fire. The wind roared through the stones, carrying the whisper of ancient prayers. They stood side by side before the broken altar. Kale drew his dagger, the same one he'd used for their oath. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "thank you for proving that I could still love something more than a crown." Lyra's eyes burned. "Don't say goodbye yet." He raised the blade, sliced his palm. "By blood, I release what was bound." She did the same, voice trembling. "By blood, I claim my freedom." Their blood hit the stone and began to glow. The mark on her ribs flared, searing hot. Kale's hand shot out, finding hers. Light poured from their skin, swirling into the air, coiling together in a spiral of silver and white. The earth shuddered. A voice, vast and soft, echoed in the wind. "You have bound yourselves not by fate, but by choice. The bond endures because you wish it to." Then the light sank into them again, warm this time, gentle. The pain vanished. Lyra opened her eyes. The mark on her ribs was still there, but softer, no longer burning. She felt Kale's heartbeat, but faintly, like a whisper she could choose to hear or ignore. "It's ours now," she said, voice breaking. "Not the goddesses. Ours." Kale smiled, relief and awe tangled together. "Then stay, not because of magic, but because you want to." She met his gaze. "If this story stayed with you, if you felt the ache, the danger, the hope, then you already know this world is only just beginning." Subscribe for more dark fantasy love stories, where monsters find redemption and hearts scarred by magic still dare to beat again. Until next time, under the same moon,